bribery, kickbacks, money laundering, arms trafficking, murder. These are the tools of the drug trade. They are global problems, and there are many victims.
Poverty-struck Caribbean islands like Haiti, the Bahamas, and Jamaica are favored conduits to the billion-dollar drug pushers.
But it doesn't stop there. The United States, with its seemingly insatiable appetite for illicit drugs, especially cocaine and its derivative crack, helps to pay the bills and foster the violence that is spreading across the country. Hi, I'm Jackie Hall.
And I'm B.T. Bentley. In many parts of the United States, drug-related gang violence is growing. The Baltimore-Washington area is no exception. Turf wars, drugs, and gang rivalries are tearing communities apart. The Jamaican community is one such community, not only because of the drug trade and violence, but because they feel they are caught in the middle of an identity crisis.
Today on City Line, we will talk to members of the Jamaican community and get their feelings on the drug problem and hear how it is affecting them.
Good afternoon and welcome back to City Line. We've kind of been away for a while with the Olympics and so forth, but during that time our topic today has been very much in the headlines. The violence growing out of drug violence, I should say, and drug use, as well as the effects of drug use are very much in the headlines today.
That's right, and especially in our own area, including the Washington, D.C. area.
And as obviously we've mentioned, one particular aspect of this problem seems to center on the Caribbean community in the United States. And we want to talk about not just the drug problem, but how it's affecting that one community at least. And we have with us a number of individuals who are going to help us get a grasp on this situation. I'd like to introduce them to you, beginning with Wayne McCook, who's representing the Jamaican Embassy. Welcome. Shirley Pulliam, who I'm sure many of you recognize as a community activist here in Baltimore. Leo Edwards, who is representing COCO, which is, if I'm not mistaken, the Council of Caribbean Organizations. Yeah. And seated next to him is Mr. Hugh Thomas, who's president of the Jamaican Progressive League. Seated next to him is another familiar face, and that of Billy Murphy, former judge and a local attorney. And seated next to him is Mario Perez, who's representing the Drug Enforcement Agency today. Thank you very much.
And welcome to City Line, each of you. Let's start with Mario and anyone else who'd like to answer this question. In the news, we've been hearing about the posses. Who are they and what are they doing? Mario.
The posses are perhaps the newest and what we believe to be the most violent, newest drug gangs, organized type, in the United States at this time, in this area particularly. And particularly,
I understand that a number have been identified throughout the country. Give us some sense of what type of numbers we're talking about in terms of numbers of different organizations or related organizations.
In approximate numbers, perhaps 3,000.
That's nationwide?
Nationwide, of
okay.
course.
Are they organized? Are they connected with any other underworld communities, such as the mafia or any other groups involved in drugs?
Within the range of our experience, the posses have their genesis, their beginnings in Jamaica. Early on, they had their affiliations with certain political parties there. Many of them came over here and continue to be organized, somewhat disorganized, but still well-structured enough to make an impact, a very serious impact on the community.
Now, let me just throw this out to some of our representatives of the Jamaican community here, as well as Jamaica in general. Is it or is it not a fact that posses exist? Are there posses?
For me,
So-called
I've just
posses.
heard that posses exist. I don't know anything about them except that. Only that the word posse clearly comes from America. And if you think of the days of the different cowboy, and you hear about posses, and the posses were there to protect and to look out for each other. And I think because Jamaican and other countries emulate America, and America has a very violent lifestyle, so you can clearly see where the word posse comes from.
But they do exist, is what you're really saying.
All I know about them is what I've read in the paper.
What is the extent of the violence connected with the posses and the Jamaican drug rings?
The posses and the Jamaican drug rings have a very violent history in Miami, New York, and many other major cities. They will not hesitate to kill. They will not hesitate to eliminate anyone who stands in their way in order to achieve their purposes. They have a transfer policy, and they move around very fluidly throughout the country. Their transfer policy, perhaps not to be comical, but perhaps it could be compared with a transfer policy of any organization, perhaps even DEA.
Now, we have some figures, some statistics showing the posse criminal activity and homicides, for instance. Can you see that, Mario, so that you can address yourself to that in terms of the numbers of murders that have been associated with the posses? And I think this is a national figure.
Yes, I can see that, yes.
Now, obviously, according to these figures, we're looking at a relatively recent phenomenon. I want to bring this back to the Jamaican community representatives we have here. Do you think that has a lot to do with the fact that we're seeing a lot, all of a sudden we're seeing a lot about Jamaica's drug activity? Not that it's something that's never existed, but suddenly, as you saw by those numbers in the last 2 or 3 years, we've seen a dramatic increase in the number of violent crimes committed within this community. Do you feel that may justify, or at least explain, I won't say justify, explain the presence in the headlines of recent days?
Well, we have a quite different perspective on the whole thing, and we believe that it is not possible to make a proper assessment of the situation without looking back at the last 10 years in Jamaica. Now, over the past 10 years, it is known that aircraft originating within the United States and boats have been going down to Jamaica illegally and bringing drugs back. Eventually, those same aircraft and boats started taking cocaine and guns into Jamaica. Now, there is evidence of the police seizing 800 pounds of cocaine from one of these illegal flights down there. The drug operators have recruited members of the ghettos. Why? Because they are mostly uneducated, impressionable, and poor.
Anyone else want to respond to that?
I'm disturbed about the whole focal point of the discussion, not about the show. I think the show is a great show, the topic is a great topic, but we're in danger of losing our perspective in this entire discussion.
In what sense?
Number one, all countries have a drug problem. Number two, in all countries these drug problems are growing. But I think what the Jamaican community got offended about, and what I got offended about as a black person, was this sudden focus on the Jamaican aspect of the drug problem and the way that the Jamaican activity was painted. It was painted as being something much more serious than anything we've seen before. And in the perspective of my 18 years in the law enforcement community, both as a judge and as a defense lawyer, it seems to me one ingredient has always been missing. We always focus on the darker-skinned people or the immigrant populations as being the source of our drug problem, and we blow it out of proportion, but we never prosecute the big white folks.
Okay, I'm not saying that we cannot agree with you on that. But does that preclude our not focusing on what is indeed a serious and violent issue? And that is the Jamaican involvement in drugs and killing.
As long as we put it in perspective, I think we need to know what's going on in the Jamaican community.
And that's what we're here to do today, is put it in perspective.
But I don't think the media has put it in proper perspective, nor do I believe for a minute those figures that I've seen on the television.
Okay, well, let's stop right there. We've got to take a break, and we're going to come back and we'll talk about some of those figures and see what else we can bring up. Please stay with us. We'll be right back.
As we all know, there's a negative aspect with all races. So, you know, I'm quite sure, as a matter of fact, I know a lot of positive Jamaicans, you know, and I think that that needs to be stressed because naturally, as you know, in the news media, the only thing you ever hear about is the posses, the groups of the drug ring, the murders that are committed. And I think that that's a terrible, detrimental statement to all the positive Jamaicans that there are here.
Billy, just before that break, you were talking about the way the media has focused on the Jamaican community. Is this basically what you take issue with, Leo and Wayne and Shirley?
Let me say, our position is very clear. Number one, the drug problem is an international problem and is not restricted to Jamaica or any particular country. Number two, we are totally opposed to the drug problem and the resultant violence, corruption, and death. Number three, we are opposed to all such activities, irrespective of the nationality, ethnic background, socio-economic background, or religious background of the perpetrators. That is our position. On the other hand, we take objection essentially to four perceptions and theses that have been projected. And I quote. One, Jamaicans, both legal and illegal, are becoming the largest organized criminal group in Jamaica. That is a quote from a report on a station. Number two, it was said that Jamaicans are becoming the major sector of the drug trade. That is physically impossible and financially impossible. Number three, it says that because these people were born in the ghetto, coming out of a poor environment, they have less regard for the human life than the average American. That is a fallacious and dangerous thesis, because the next step from that is to say that violence results from being poor, that all poor people are violent, and very soon we're going to be hearing that all black people who are poor are violent. And then we are going to be told that the drug problem is a black inner city problem, which it is not. The recent RAND report confirms very clearly
and we're going to get into that.
Bigger in the suburbs.
Okay.
So, no, and the final point, I just want to make one other point to which we object. It says that the Jamaican community are now a special item of investigation. The average American cannot distinguish between a Jamaican accent, a Barbadian, a Trinidadian, or any. And so already we have reports of Caribbean peoples being stopped and harassed because they are judged to have a Jamaican accent.
Okay, so what we really are seeing is something of an identity crisis, which is to say that
no, there's no identity crisis. We have no identity.
You just said that people can't distinguish between Jamaicans.
No, but don't say we have.
I didn't say you.
Others have a problem identifying us.
Okay.
We have no identity crisis.
That's what I want to address. We have no identity crisis. We know exactly who we are. Okay? And
see, you're playing a semantic game here. And,
no.
And what I'm trying to identify is that there is indeed, whether it's correct or false, a problem in identifying
that is correct.
What's going on. So let's not play at the semantics.
No, what that has done is give a negative self-image of Jamaicans.
BT, I think,
because of these statements, because of the kind of sensational media coverage that has been done by the station, by the news media, I mean the written media, and those are the kinds of things we object about. I've lived in Baltimore for over 28 years, and you know, for the first time in my life living here, I begin to feel inferior. And what inferiority does, it breeds anxiety, and anxiety breeds hostility. And we are a law-abiding group of people, and we don't like to be put in that position.
Let me ask a question, plain devil's advocate here on City Line. You do admit there is a problem with Jamaicans being involved in the drug trafficking and violent criminal activity. Is that correct?
On the basis of the reports, they are, and if the police say they are, we are not prepared to deny.
Okay.
What we are saying, however, that they are not, it is being made to appear that they are the major component, and that is what we are objecting.
Okay, but you do admit there is a problem. Okay, now let me ask you, would you have come forth had not the media so-called sensationalized the involvement of Jamaicans in the crime activity or drug activity?
I mean, if you come forth, do what?
In terms of being outspoken against the negative behavior.
No, only
against
because we're
drug trafficking.
But the United States has declared a war on drugs. The United States has more resources than Jamaica and anybody else to fight this problem. We are supportive of anybody who is fighting the drug problem. There was no need for us to come forth. We are on record as saying we are opposed. We have come forth, and we have always been opposed to the drug trade. We have come forth to speak against the generalizations which have been put forward to make it appear that all Jamaicans and Caribbean peoples are involved.
What percentage do you believe of the Jamaican community is involved in drug trafficking in the United States or in the Baltimore, Washington area?
Probably less than 5%.
But the statistics do not bear that out.
Where are the statistics that show that greater than 5% of the Jamaican immigrants involved in drugs? And let me point this out, Jack.
But the statistics that we have gotten from AFT and DEA indicate that the arrests and the murders involving Jamaicans in the crime activity and drug activity is nearing 30%.
30%?
No.
That is
very
Exactly, 30% of what? Now, you see, I think you can get numbers to say anything you want. And the law enforcement community has an axe to grind. They have to constantly show they're succeeding against the fight, in the fight against drugs, and that they need more and more resources to fight this battle. And so I don't think we ought to trust law enforcement figures.
But whose figures do we use?
Do we have any
but
figures
if there's a
that
healthy
you would like to put forth?
skepticism, if there's a healthy skepticism about it, then we'll be prompted to do our own investigations. Now, I know Jamaican people all my life. I've been to Jamaica 11, 12 times, was down there about 4 weeks ago. The quality of life in Jamaica, you couldn't imagine from the news reports in the United States. We didn't have a crime problem down there.
When we come back, we're going to have to take a break, and when we come back, perhaps we can get a better perspective on what types of numbers that we are talking about.
That is correct.
And then
we need to talk
deal directly with
And we
them.
also need to hear from Mario Perez, who is with DEA, about those statistics as well. We'll take a break, and we will come back and continue our discussion on Jamaicans, drug, crime, whatever, and clear up some of the misconceptions.
Well, I think the Jamaican community should get together and talk to someone about, the publicity that they are getting, and maybe do something about it and show that, the Jamaican community isn't all drug related.
Now here's this week's community calendar.
Hello, my name is Robin Gadsden. The Baltimore Metropolitan Alumni Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated will celebrate its first Founders Day on Sunday, March 13th, 3 p.m. at the Forum. Broadway and television star Teresa Merritt Hines will be the guest speaker as we celebrate the theme, Black Women in the Arts, Reaching Towards New Horizons. For tickets and further information, please call 363-7556.
Hello, my name is Cecilia Stokes. The Freedom Chapter of the American Business Women's Association presents the Woman of the Year Luncheon and Fashion Show on Saturday, March 19th, beginning at noon at the Forum. Join us for this exciting event and see some fabulous garments by designer Catherine Wooten. For tickets and further information, call 764-3475.
Hello, my name is Tyrone Vines. You're invited to be part of the annual Men's and Women's Day Prayer Breakfast of Christ United Methodist Church on Saturday, April the 2nd, at the church located at Chase and Washington Streets. Our guest speaker, Reverend Vasti McKenzie, will address our theme, He Rose for Us. It's free and the public is welcome to attend. For further information, call 732-5600.
Hello, my name is Deborah Marshall. The Baltimore Homeless Union presents an entertainment extravaganza this evening, March the 6th at the Palladium beginning at 7 p.m. There will be delicious foods, refreshments, Baltimore's best bands, dancing, singing, fashion presentations, comedians, and much more. Proceeds from this exciting event will benefit the homeless. For tickets and further information, call 354-3903.
If your group or organization would like to announce an event, please write us in care of City Line, WJZ-TV, Television Hill, Baltimore, Maryland, 21211, or call us for further information at 466-0013 between the hours of 9 and 5.
Welcome back to City Line and our discussion on drugs and how it may or may not relate to the Caribbean community here in Baltimore. Before we begin, again, let me just clear up one piece of information. And I'm going to try to do this, Mary. You help me out if I do not do this correctly. Jackie, you quoted a figure of about 30% before we left of suspected involvement among the Caribbean community in the drug trade. My understanding is that that is a misextrapolation of two different figures, one dealing with a national figure of approximately 3,000 drug-related arrests within this community, another being an estimated population in the Baltimore-Washington region of 10 to 15,000 people in that community. Somehow the two numbers were put together and misquoted, coming up with a 30% figure. The DEA refutes that, as well as the Jamaican community here,
Give
if
us
I'm not
a
mistaken.
sense of it, Mario.
I'd like to reorient you with those figures. First of all, the arrests that have been made are not arrests necessarily of the members of the social aggregate, Jamaicans. They are the total arrest of people in this area and throughout the area that have been arrested here. Many of the Jamaicans that arrive in this area are not necessarily from here. They have no roots here. Jamaicans in this posse situation are individuals highly fluid, highly mobile, will come into an area, set up their business, and be out of here within 90 days. And that even applies to apartment complexes, where they will go set up an apartment, 1, to sell, 2, to store their money, 3, to make a sale, 1, to observe.
So very nomadic.
Highly nomadic, in that sense. I don't know who the intellectual author of that figure was. However, I would like to explain it that way, and I recognize the fact that there are only 10 to 12,000, maybe 15,000 Jamaicans in this greater metropolitan area, and to say that 3,000 of them are engaged in traffic is something very alarming and should preoccupy a proud and a noble people as the Jamaicans.
Okay, thank you
Since
for
it is
clearing
not
that up.
true.
We have
Since
two
it is
questions now from
not
the
true.
audience.
Yes, I would like to address this question to Mr. Perez.
Yes, sir.
Of course, you're with the DEA.
Yes, sir.
And I would like to find out. In fact, we know that the media have so far sensationalized this issue. But my question is, the so-called posses in the Baltimore-Washington area, do you think they are manipulating the drug business in this area?
Our estimation is that they are jockeying, as I said once, for position in the crack area. Crack is a type of cocaine that is highly marketable, easily sold, quite inexpensive compared to cocaine hydrochloride. And there are indicators that show that the Jamaican posses are attempting to solidify their position in the crack trade.
Also, I'd like to know what percent you're referring to as far as Jamaican posses that are operating the Baltimore-Washington area. Can you focus on that somewhat?
I can only give you guesstimates. In the DC area, the tendency has been that the Jamaicans, posses, are beginning to control to a large extent the crack trafficking in the DC area. In other areas, of course, there are other groups, not necessarily Cubans or Puerto Ricans, but Americans in general, of all colors. The Jamaicans in Miami have used Miami and New York as a base of operations to buy cocaine, to convert it into crack, and to distribute it in areas where it's marketable. DC metropolitan is an outstanding area to market almost anything. When the rest of the country is in a recession, there is still prosperity in this area.
Okay, we have another question or comment from our audience member. Yes, sir.
Yeah, my comment is the media coverage of this event is infuriating and is denigrating for Jamaicans as a whole. Number one, it does a few things. It creates negative stereotype. It's deflecting the poor and shoddy operation that the American scene is carrying out in containing the drug trafficking. That it's not a Jamaican problem, and to single out a group of people and create negative stereotyping is wrong. For instance, if you're a Jamaican coming through the Miami area now, you're stripped of your dignity by being physically, your clothes taken off and searched. Here in Baltimore, if you're driving around, they can stop you at will. And I think that's wrong. It creates a negative stereotype. The next thing is you come to this country, you're saying that Jamaicans, especially for the piece from Channel 13, which went down to Jamaica and showed all the poor areas. If I did a piece in Appalachia, in East Baltimore, or Bedford-Stuyvesant went to Russia and showed it, can you imagine the images it would create in the Russians' mind about Americans? And I want the to not be one-dimensional and sensationalizing, but give a realistic appraisal of the situation and deal with it in a proper manner.
If I may speak to that, in that the perspective of Jamaica has now been brought to the fore. I quite agree with Dr. Morrison's statement, because Jamaica, like any other society, is multifaceted. We have poverty, and it's a problem we are fighting to deal with. We recognize that the way to deal with poverty is to, over time, concentrate on developing economic programs which can allow opportunity to our citizens. And it's a process that is being worked at with great effort by our government.
Let me ask you, why do you think then, and we all agree that the drug problem is an international problem, why do you think that Jamaicans were singled out?
Maybe we can address that. That is not just, it's not a Jamaican or a Caribbean problem. We have to really address that.
No.
It's a black problem.
Why do you think?
Because they single out black folks for many things. And you're not addressing the Caucasian and the people who are making the money. And we've got to stop that. Clearly, maybe I want to make one quick statement, is that there are over, you said about 10,000 Jamaicans live in this area. We are nurses, doctors, lawyers, domestic. In the audience right here, you have an MD, Dr. Morgan, right there. You have Dr. Davis, a dentist. We are people who have been law-abiding, and we're a proud people. And we don't like this kind of negative kind of, media coverage that's being done by the station.
Let me again try to put it in some kind of perspective. My fascination with the Jamaican people goes back to the fact that they've had their independence since the early 60s and have had to run a government by themselves, police departments by themselves, be airline pilots and run an international airline by themselves, and do all kinds of things by themselves that we as black Americans have not had a chance to do. And so when Jamaicans immigrate to America, they generally have a much higher level of achievement, social integration, close family structure than native-born black Americans. We have much to gain from Jamaicans. But we will never learn that in the media. And I was particularly offended by that.
Let's continue our discussion right after this. We'll take a break and come right back. Okay, we're back, and we have too many comments and questions from the audience, and we want to get to them quickly so that we can get as many in as we possibly can.
My question is to Mr. Perez. You made the point that Jamaicans come here and they move around like nomads from apartments to apartments. Did you know that in Washington, D.C., a black newspaper has said in this area that there was an Operation Caribbean cruise in D.C. area where hundreds of Jamaicans' doors were kicked down and not 1 ounce of drugs was found? None at all, absolutely none. How can you say that we come here and move around from as nomads from apartments to apartments when you have not been able to catch any of us doing the things that you say that we do?
In all respect to what you've just told me, I did not say that Jamaicans are nomads. We were talking about the method of operation of the posses, of the criminal element. I would be less than honest if I were to say anything else. That has been a matter of fact. Let me say this perhaps to reiterate with my colleague to the right from the Jamaican embassy has just said. Jamaica, shortly after its independence, was and continues to be an aggressive, active participant in international interdiction of drugs. It spends a lot of its gross national product in complementing our efforts and the efforts of many other responsible countries of the world in fighting drugs. Jamaica historically was in 3rd place after Mexico and Colombia in the production, the harvesting, and the exportation of marijuana, or ganja. In any case, today, or perhaps it may be in 3rd place. The point I'm trying to make is that we in the Drug Enforcement Administration recognize Jamaica's contributions. The fact that certain elements knocked down doors and did whatever, it was incorrect. I do not say that Jamaicans are nomads. On the contrary.
If I may just add to what Agent Perez has said, Jamaica's history in the fight against drugs has been one of forceful efforts to interdict and eradicate. Last year, we reduced by destruction the production of marijuana by some 78%. We destroyed of a total of 1,760 metric tons. We reduced that in destruction efforts to 460 metric tons. And these figures, I think, speak volumes in terms of the commitment of a country with limited resources to lead the fight against drugs. And I think that is something which has to be recognized. We do not in any way smile at the issue of drugs. We fight it with an iron fist.
Okay, another question or comment, quickly please.
Yes, my question is directed to the representative from the embassy. In last Wednesday's edition of the Wall Street Journal, there was an article indicating where Congressman Wilson from Texas was able to deny a substantial amount of economic aid from reaching Jamaica. Do you see this as a sort of a political repercussion from the negative press that Jamaica has been receiving?
I think we're speaking to 2 totally different issues.
Well, actually, what happened is there was no legitimate reason for him to deny the aid. So do you think the press reports have sort of present a negative perspective on Jamaica, where it seems like it's no longer important to give economic aid that was actually earmarked for a housing project in Jamaica?
No, I think the issue which you raise predates or took place before all of this came into focus. So they're 2 totally different issues.
And in addition to that, that congressman is suspected of having held up that aid grant because a close associate of his was denied a project in Jamaica. And so it appeared to be a purely personal thing. But let me add one other thing to the discussion. We've talked about the great things about Jamaica, and we've got to talk about one of the dark sides that we all are concerned about, and that is the fact that since the Jamaican community tends to be more socially and culturally intelligent across the board than the native-born black American community, the kinds of criminal organizations that exist in the Jamaican community, and we all admit that there are some there, reflect that higher intelligence. And the use of violence among these criminal organizations is a much more intelligent, albeit more sinister and criminal usage than you see in the black community as a whole, because you don't find the emotional outburst kind of violence, you find a more purposeful kind of violence. I think that's what the agent is talking about when he's talking about what we ought to be concerned about. We'd be less than candid if we use this show as an opportunity to whitewash a serious problem. All we are saying, though, is that it ought to be put in perspective in terms of the international drug problem and our national struggle against drugs. And if you do that, it's still a pimple on a gnat's behind.
But I still think that only a part of the story is being told here. Jamaicans are also victims, just as the United States is. And as I said earlier, the aircrafts that have been going down there, that have been taking drugs and guns down, everyone knows that to the ghetto youth, the gun is a symbol of power. These same planes are the vehicles that are bringing the Jamaicans back into the United States. They're taking them into Dallas, Texas, into New York, into Washington, D.C., and in Miami. These are the fellows that are called posses up here. It's a problem for Jamaica because the guns that they have taken down there, the police have seized over 3,000 guns, including M16s, over the last several years. For 100 years previous to the advent of these planes going there, fewer than 500 Jamaicans have been killed by guns. Since they have been going down there, over 2,700 Jamaicans have been killed. So we are also victims. We are not responsible for all of this.
Okay, I'm glad you made that point. And let's go on to continue to broaden the discussion without losing sight of what we're talking about. And we're talking about victimization of a particular group of people, but there is a reason for that. It's not that this group was singled out beyond the fact that it is part of a pipeline that originates somewhere else. Just as you said, Jamaicans are a victim. My question is, and I'm going to direct this to you, Mr. McCook, how that relates beyond the obvious and the problem that we're discussing today, how that turns and affects your tourism, how that affects the political situation in Jamaica. We're seeing a Latin American government supposedly controlled by these drug marketers and so forth. Are you saying that there is no problem along those terms in Jamaica?
Clearly not. The fact that I speak so strongly on the issue of our efforts to attack the drug problem indicates that we share the concern that all governments around the world must have in the face of the threat of those who use the drug industry to further their own ends against legitimate society. Jamaica understands that the drug threat cannot be taken lightly, and because of this, we are moving forward offensively against the drug trade. And I think what that speaks for in this situation is our hope, and I'm certain that we will be able to stem the tide of this force of drug involvement in terms of its building a base from which our country can be victimized in a serious way.
And BT, I think it gets back to another thing. We got to know what's going on among Jamaican immigrants the same way as we got to know about what's going on among Italians, blacks, Puerto Ricans, and white people. But we don't really pay attention to what's going on in suburban white America, where they have the money to buy much larger quantities of drugs, or the appetites are larger, where the drug usage can be concealed by the fact that they can buy the drugs without having to commit crimes to do it, where very little investigative effort is spent, where fewer dollars are spent on eliminating that part of the drug problem, where we don't get into the banking industry, where we are not, for example, looking at George Bush's connection with Noriega.
Okay,
and
you got on George Bush, that was your step out of bounds. I'm going to cut you off there. You've got to take a break. We'll be right back in just a minute.
We're going to continue our discussion and try to get as many questions in as possible.
First, Jackie, I'd like to share some identity here with some of my people. Contrary to the news, or an article in the news last week, I'm also an average Jamaican, just like many of us in the audience here. And I must say, we are not at all fascinated by guns. And I'd like to direct this at the Mario from DA. Just recently in the news article, one was on last Tuesday and one was on Friday, there were reports of 2 cocaine busts here in Maryland, one at the Golden Ring Shopping Center and one in Towson, I think it was, in the Parksville area. The one in Parksville area concerned a ring of 6 people and total involvement, I think it was $10 million a year, and a house for $200,000 was confiscated. And it did specify that the ring was infiltrated 2 years ago.
Okay, your question now.
And the question, how come we or the DA or the law enforcement here can infiltrate a group that long, 6 people, for that amount of money, and yet the Jamaican involvement, which I'm sure is much less in economics or funds there, is spread out as such somewhat sensational?
Once again, I do not make the news, and I don't make it sensational. I will say this, that the Drug Enforcement Administration, when it infiltrates an organization, it does not do it capriciously, but it does its homework. If it takes 2 years, it'll take its 2 years or 2 months. Normally, our track record is such that when we arrest someone, we will get, chances are we'll get about a 99% conviction rate, not because we are infallible, but because we may have taken the 2 years. We did our homework. We did the things within the law,
Okay,
without sensationalism.
Let me do this again. I asked a question about 7 minutes ago as to why you think the Jamaican community has been singled out. And I'm wondering whether or not that is still the underlying point here.
It really wasn't answered. And
I would like to speak to that. The Jamaica Progressive League is an affiliate of the People's National Party in Jamaica. And if the polls are correct, it is likely that the People's National Party will again become the government of Jamaica. Now, I do agree with the representative from the embassy that tourism is up, but in this area where this negative press has been prominent, tourism is devastating. And all you have to do is to check with the Air Jamaica office in Baltimore for the 6 years that they have been there.
What is the link again?
The link is that Jamaica imports medicine and food from the United States. They need the dollars to buy food, to buy medicine. If those dollars are not forthcoming and a new government goes in, then we're going to hear again that they mismanaged the government.
But let me see if I can
People are asking why this is happening. We know, and I believe the authorities here do know, that these posse groups are transported here from Jamaica illegally by these planes that are going down there.
Okay.
Planes have been seized by the Jamaican government. Planes have crashed down there. Cocaine has been taken off planes. Guns have been recovered. All of these things are happening down there, and I'm sure they know. Okay. And if these planes that are coming here, what if they were bringing weapons into the United States? Would they permit them to land? I don't think so.
Okay, let's hear some
I think the question is, why are the Jamaicans being singled out for media coverage? Shirley answered the question in part. Part of it is because immigrant populations, especially the newer immigrants, always catch hell in America. When the Italians were new here, they caught hell. When the Polish people were new, they caught hell. Now it's the Jamaicans' turn to catch hell, and it's not fair. The second thing, it's a black-white thing. Because the people who are setting the drug enforcement priorities in America are white. And the top dollar goes to the highly visible street drug arrests and the busts of the door. It fits into our cops and robber mentality in America. And it covers up the fact that we're not spending money on the upper level drug importation that actually brings the drugs to these Jamaican posses.
Okay, and the media.
I have a twofold question for Mario and Wayne. Mario, I'd like to know what has been the level of participation for the Jamaican authorities, the legal authorities in Jamaica. Is there a task force, joint task force being formed? And when and how is it being formed? And the second part of the question to Wayne, is the current government in Jamaica concerned about these members of the posse when they are caught and deported back to Jamaica, that the impact that these people will have on the community in Jamaica as a whole?
Okay, let Mario answer the first part first, and then the second part, Wayne.
DEA has a very close alliance with the Jamaican constabulary forces. They work every day, 365 days a year, in very aggressive eradication programs. That's what we do in Jamaica with our Jamaican allies. Investigations, aggressive ones. If it were not, Jamaica is the trampoline in the Caribbean, as other islands are, in the connection between the movement of drugs between South America and the United States. Jamaica, the Jamaican forces are one of our principal allies, undoubtedly. Let me say this in response to my colleague to the right. If it was true that we just dwelt with low-level dealers, we wouldn't be indicting heads of state. If we dwelt in looking at low-level people, we have indicted and we have accused and we have brought before the tribunals leaders of governments, ministers, people of ministerial rank, and people very, very high that are highly insulated. And at times, it takes 2 years. It takes 2 years because these individuals are so insulated that it takes that long to do the investigation properly. Once again, the aggressiveness that some people in the community expect of law enforcement is rightfully taken. However, I would suggest that that degree of aggressiveness be also shared in the community.
But Mario, look, I said
shared in this sense that the problem exists. We've talked about Jamaica and how great an alliance it has. But the fact is that these delinquents, just like there are Cuban delinquents and Jamaican delinquents and Colombian delinquents, just like we stand up and to be counted and say, no, no, they are a minority. What are we as a community, as parents? Because the common denominator here is not that I am a DEA agent, or we have heads of governments here, or representatives of governments, or heads of the community and political actors. The fact is that there's one common denominator, that we are fathers and mothers, and we have children.
Okay, we're going to take a break right there.
Mario,
We'll have to take a break right there.
All right.
Please stay with us. We'll be back to continue the discussion. Stay with us.
Wednesday night, I saw the program air about the Jamaicans. I feel as though we have that same type of atmosphere in our own communities and in the white communities, okay? So therefore, we are focusing on one group. We should focus on all three groups because the problem is there.
Before we conclude today's show, we want to tell you that we will not be on the air next Sunday, but Cityline will be on the Saturday before, which is the 12th, right? The 12th. We will have a special prime time special entitled From Bourgeois to Bumpy, the Emerging Black Middle Class, and that's Saturday, March 12th at 7 p.m. And we'd like for you to tune in then for that special. For seat reservations, call us now at 481-1313. Now let's continue our discussion today. And B2, you have a question.
Yeah, we're going to try to take one more quick question before we go. Question or comment? Briefly, please.
Yeah. What I want to comment on is about the illegal alien that stole away from Jamaica and those that are in here pushing drugs. What I want to mention is that there are Jamaicans that leave as farmers, come to the United States. They were promised a social security number which they did not receive. There are a lot of them willing to work today. They cannot get no jobs. It eventually comes down to the survivors. We do not agree with the drugs. We are asking the government to open a way for them so they can get a social security number to work, and we will have a better America.
Any comments on that?
Well, I'm not going to address
We still think that the biggest problem relating to posse groups pertains to the illegal aliens that are being transported here from Jamaica to the United States. Now, the Jamaica Progressive League has been looking at this for some time, and we have launched an essay contest in Jamaica among school-age children 12 to 16. We're hoping to get the youth focusing on that problem so that there will be less recruiting in the future.
There's a connection between the illegal immigrants and the drug trade, because when you are part of bringing illegal immigrants to America, you control those people because they're always living under the threat of being exposed as illegals. Consequently, it's easy to get them to work in things like posses and to be involved.
Okay, let's do our final wrap-up here. What conclusions are we to draw from our discussion and from the problems, and what do you see as solutions?
I just want to say that the war against drugs can only be be improved by united, effective actions by the federal government, the police, private citizens, and business. And that's what, and I think, I know we're almost off the air, but clearly there's a lot of Jamaicans, 10,000 of us out there, that are still angry about the negative media coverage, and the media need to take their emphasis and put it on the Caucasians who own the ships and the planes and who buy the guns and who take it into Jamaica and bring the people out.
What do you say to the Jamaicans who are involved, though, in the drug trafficking and also in the violence, the murders?
We say the same thing that we say to anybody who is involved, that the drug problem is one of the most vicious problems afflicting all strata of society, but most especially our children, that we want to stop it. And as we have met with police in D.C., and we have talked to the police in D.C. tell us that it is a very small proportion, and we also wanted to say that whereas they set up a task force calling one a Jamaican task force and a Nigerian, they've pledged that those names will be dropped because they have come to understand that it is not a Jamaican problem but a drug problem.
Okay, let me give Mario Perez one quick statement, because he's been here unfortunately representing all law enforcement, and he does not. But if you have one last comment that you would make from DEA's perspective, what would it be?
We will admit that it's the posses who have given the Jamaicans a bad name. Let's put the blame where it belongs. Not the media, not law enforcement, but the delinquents in our community who have given us and tarnished our reputations. And that is not the Jamaican responsibility to do that, but all of us as brothers and sisters in our community.
I say let's focus on the big delinquents and put them in their proper place, and that's in jail.
I would want to say that there are innumerable examples of Jamaicans who have stood in this country